I paid for my parents and sister to attend my wedding, they never showed up. I exposed the truth, and their lives fell apart. Hey everyone. Before we kick off today's video, I've got a favor to ask. We've noticed our channel isn't getting as much love lately, and subscribing is one of the easiest ways you can help us out. It's quick, free, and it means we can keep bringing you awesome content. Your support really means a lot, so let's work together to keep this channel growing. Thanks a bunch. Now, let's dive into the video. Your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day, full of flowers, laughs, and loads of love, right? That's exactly what I had in mind when I started planning mine. I booked the venue way ahead, a cute little spot with fairy lights and a rooftop garden that didn't break the bank. I made sure to have vegetarian options for my sister and picked out some champagne just for my mom. To make it easier for my family, I even changed the wedding date to be closer to my hometown because they said they couldn't afford the trip. I totally got it and even helped them out with hotel rooms, flights, and clothes. I even covered my sister's husband's costs so she wouldn't have to come alone. I believed it was worth it because, in the end, family's supposed to be there for you, right? But little did I know, showing up meant something different to them than it did to me. On the morning of the wedding, I was up early. My best friend, who I practically grew up with, and his partner texted me. They had just landed, and it made me smile thinking about our Pokemon card trading days. They paid for their hotel and tickets themselves, no fuss, just happy to be there. Meanwhile, I was glued to my phone, refreshing the app to track my parents' flight. It was on time, so I kept hoping they'd arrive soon. Like some nervous teen on a first date, I watched out the dressing room window every few minutes. At 3 o'clock, the officiant arrived, gave a kind smile, and asked if we were ready to start. I told her we needed a few more minutes, thinking maybe my parents hit traffic or their phones died. I called them but went straight to voicemail, tried again, still no answer. As the makeup artist finished up, the photographer took some shots of me smiling with my bouquet by the window. I kept checking my phone through it all, nothing. By 3:30, my best friend peeked in, softly knocked, and asked if we should start. My heart sank because my dad was supposed to walk me down the aisle. I forced a smile that felt so fake it hurt and said, "Let's give it 5 more minutes." My friend pretended not to notice my shaking hands, just nodded, and waited with me. I called again, voicemail. Finally, at 3:37, my phone rang. My mom's number flashed, and I nearly dropped it. "Hey, sweetie," Mom said casually, "sorry we couldn't make it." I was stunned. "What happened?" I asked, and she just chuckled, like I was the one being silly. "Your sister's brother-in-law had a poetry reading. We needed to support her. You know, family." I was speechless. They had chosen a poetry reading over my wedding, and it wasn't even her reading, it was her husband's brother's. And they didn't even bother to tell me beforehand. They let me wait, worried sick, thinking maybe they were lost or hurt. I had covered everything to make it easy for them, moved the whole wedding closer, and still, it wasn't enough. I put my phone away at 3:45, took a deep breath, and there was my best friend. He was ready to be there for me, no questions asked. "Would you?" I asked, my voice breaking, "walk me down the aisle?" He smiled without missing a beat, "Of course." So, I walked hand in hand with the guy who used to build tree forts with me, and once even sewed a Barbie dress when my sister was too busy laughing to help. The ceremony went on, vows were exchanged, rings slipped on, cheers filled the air, and despite it all, I smiled until my cheeks hurt, laughed at the jokes, cut the cake, and danced with my new husband under the twinkling lights I had hung myself. But something hard and cold settled inside me. Later that night, after everyone left, and it was just the two of us, I opened my laptop. Still wearing his jacket, my husband walked over. "You sure about this?" he asked gently. I nodded, fingers already tapping away. "You know once you send it, you can't undo it," he reminded me, but I was ready. I looked up, smiled for the first time that felt real, and sent it. "They say your wedding night is for looking forward, starting fresh." I tried, but I couldn't shake the past. So there I was, all snuggled up next to my husband under these super cozy hotel blankets, and I couldn't help but think about my sister. She's 3 years older than me, and back in high school, she was pretty much the girl everyone wanted to hang out with. You know the type, the one rocking all the cool brand name outfits, with that shiny hair and an easy laugh that made you feel lucky just to be near her. But man, she could be kind of a snob, especially to people she didn't think fit in. And yeah, that included me. I remember seeing it all go down in the school hallways, a sly smile here or a whispered comment behind someone's back. If someone walked by in thrift store shoes, she might fake a cough that was not so subtle. It was so smooth most people didn't even notice, but I sure did, especially when it was aimed at me. While she got praised for being picky or having standards by her parents, I was the one sobbing because she'd left me out once again. Mom would shrug it off, saying, "You can't expect her to be friends with just anyone," and Dad would chime in, "You need to toughen up. Not everyone's meant to be popular." Like I was the one at fault for not being like her. Honestly, I didn't mind not being the center of attention. I was happy with my small circle of close friends. My next door neighbor was my best buddy, and we'd spend countless afternoons building Lego worlds and making up stories about superheroes who baked cookies instead of saving the day. Once, when we were 8, he proudly brought over a doll he'd won at a carnival, and we named it Captain Sprinkles. We found it hilarious, but my parents? Not so much. Dad once remarked, loud enough for me to hear, "Boys like that usually turn out funny," while Mom made some offhand comment about him preferring dolls to football, as if it was just a joke. My folks didn't even bother hiding their disappointment when I preferred my quirky friends over being the social butterfly my sister was. They had high hopes for her and kind of gave up on expecting much from me. While my sister was off at fancy parties, I was at home working on science fair projects. Every little thing she accomplished was celebrated, while my efforts, like getting an academic scholarship, barely got a nod. "You were always the quiet one," Mom said with one of those vague smiles that seemed to explain everything. Over time, I learned that love in our family was kind of conditional. For my sister, it was loud and proud, but for me, it was silent and unnoticed. It was all about putting on a show, not the hard work. When I stopped being entertaining, they stopped paying attention. The gap between us just grew as we got older. My sister always had a safety net, even with unpaid internships or jobs she left behind. Meanwhile, I was hustling, working nights, and running my little online business, quietly paying half the mortgage while they told me I was lucky to live at home. Then I met my husband. He was grounded, a couple of years older, and for once, someone saw me for me and not through the lens of my sister's shadow. He cared about my work, listened to me, and made me believe I was enough just as I was. But the first time my sister met him, I saw that flicker of interest in her eyes. Her laugh was a bit too eager, and she leaned in just a touch too close. She even tried to bump into him when I wasn't around and later sent him a message to hang out without me. He politely declined, and I thought that was the end of it. But nope. A few weeks later, she went crying to our parents, saying, "I saw him first, it's not fair." The fact that she was with someone else didn't matter. To my family, her hurt feelings made me the villain. "Maybe you should think about your sister's feelings for once," Mom suggested, and Dad agreed that family was more important than some guy. No one stopped to think about my feelings at all. So, she had this backup plan, you know? Her husband was rich, dependable, and super generous. Perfect if you cared more about a fancy last name on wedding invites than actual love. But behind closed doors, she'd always gossip, saying stuff like, "I settled. He's boring but at least he's loaded." She even joked that he thought he'd hit the jackpot with her. Poor dude. She'd spill everything after a few drinks, even bragging about her affairs. My parents? They just laughed it off. Mom would say, "Marriage is complicated," while gesturing like she was giving a TED talk, and Dad would chime in with, "Let her have her fun." I wasn't about to quietly clean up her messes this time. Someone deserved to know the truth, someone didn't need to be silently humiliated like I had been. Maybe it was revenge, maybe solidarity, or maybe I just wanted to finally be on the right side. So, I shut my laptop, took a deep breath, and decided no apologies. Tomorrow was a new day. The next morning, my phone was blowing up with calls from home and my mom. Even some unknown number, awkward. But I ignored it, pulled the blanket over my head, and let the motel AC be my lullaby. If it was urgent, they could text. Sure enough, they did. "Call us now." "What did you do?" Ignored that too and flipped my phone screen down. Meanwhile, my partner across the room mumbled, "Everything okay?" I just said, "Family drama, must be Tuesday," and we both went back to our blanket caves. Later that morning, a text from my not-so-social cousin read, "Yo, heard your sis's hubby dipped. Family's freaking out." Yeah, that was one way to put it. Over the next few days, bits and pieces of their drama trickled in like a puzzle missing half its pieces. Turns out, my sister's husband saw all the evidence I'd sent, screenshots, recordings, you name it, about her trash talking and cheating. He'd stuck by her through everything, job quits, lease breaks, broken dreams, but she'd never really valued him. After he read that, there was just a long, tense silence. He left without a fuss, and by week's end, divorce papers were filed. With him went the invisible safety net my parents relied on. He stopped paying for their bills and mortgage, like someone turned off a free-flowing tap they didn't even know they had. I made my own quiet moves, canceled the payments I'd been covering for their emergencies, utilities, and co-signed vehicle lease. I quietly severed financial ties, moving my savings to a safer place where I wouldn't feel guilty about using them. Financial collapse isn't an instant thing, it sneaks up on you. First, you miss credit card minimums, then pay bills late, and soon, suppliers start calling. The bank denies your credit line increase, regrets and all, just like how my family's treatment of me had come apart over the years, a slow, painful collapse. At night, the silence and emptiness crept in. Breaking away from my parents wasn't like falling off a cliff like I'd imagined. It was more like unshackling a weight from my ankle, drifting instead of plummeting. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. Sometimes, the loss hit harder than expected, like when writing thank you notes and realizing my parents weren't among the guests, or when I spotted a mother of the bride frame in a store and almost reached for it, foolishly expecting they'd care. And there were moments when a stranger's kindness stung more than any family betrayal ever did. My spouse and I were casually chatting when someone gave us a big grin and said, "You guys must come from super supportive families." I couldn't help but chuckle at that because, honestly, my family is more about preserving their own egos. When you grow up around people like that, you develop a unique sense of humor. It's not the kind that makes you burst out laughing, but more like the kind of humor that keeps you sane during a weary 2 a.m. coffee session at a dingy diner, just grateful to be anywhere else but there. Other subtle changes were happening too. I found out I was pregnant about 2 weeks after we got married. In that tiny hotel bathroom, my heart was racing, my back pressed against the cold wall as I stared at the test. There wasn't a real plan, it was sooner than we thought, but not entirely unexpected. As I sat there, feeling the world slightly tilting, my palms were flat against the chilly tiles. When I shared the news with my husband, he just grinned, hugged me, and said, "We're ready. You're ready." And oddly enough, I really believed him, which was a refreshing change. I decided to keep my family in the dark, even as the emails and texts started rolling in. Some news, especially the kind that wouldn't make them happy, just didn't belong to them. It felt too precious to hand over to folks who would twist it into something else. Meanwhile, their world was slowly unraveling. I wasn't oblivious, but I wasn't looking for updates either. Gossip bounced around from cousins, curious texts popped up from old neighbors, and the long-dormant family chat buzzed with second-hand anxiety. Business plummeted, salespeople started to pull back, bills were stacking up, first the smaller ones, then the big ones missed. It wasn't a dramatic crash yet, no court summons or foreclosure notices, but the tension was definitely building, like that first crack in glass. They hadn't darkened my doorstep, not yet. When things got bad enough that panic finally toppled their pride, they would. Sometimes I wondered if they were shocked the calm one didn't crumble. They probably never realized how much they leaned on the phantom daughter. On quiet nights, I'd sit at the kitchen table with paperwork for our new house. My husband would browse listings, and occasionally, my childhood best friend would call. We'd laugh about the time we accidentally flooded his garage trying to make a waterslide, and chat about our old neighborhood. After the baby came, we even made some half-serious plans to visit. He never asked about my folks, he didn't need to. True family knows when survival hinges on silence. By month 3 after the wedding, things at my parents' were clearly spiraling. Their company's so-called temporary shutdown for renovations dragged on and on. Under the guise of downsizing for retirement, their house quietly went up for early offers. People began to notice, the invites stopped, replaced by pitying looks. It was a slow, quiet unraveling, devoid of dramatic clashes or loud arguments. A bit like how they eroded my trust over the years, each day I drifted further away. But it felt like flying, not falling. When they finally did show up, it was pouring, not the romantic kind but a downpour that made you think you should start building an ark. Right in the middle of folding little onesies with mint green and yellow stars, the doorbell rang 5 times, as if someone was leaning on it. My husband and I exchanged that knowing look across the kitchen. Through the peephole, I saw them, my parents and sister, rain-soaked with angry, tight grins, suitcases at their feet. It took me a moment. I stood there, taking a deep breath, my forehead pressed against the soft wood of the door, my husband gently resting a supportive hand on my back. "We can call now," he suggested. "Not yet," I whispered back. Sometimes you need to witness things before you let them burn. When I finally opened the door, they bulldozed inside, dripping rainwater all over the floor. My sister dumped her bag on the floor like she owned the place, and my dad planted himself by the TV, my mom nodding as if she expected me to offer tea. "We're not leaving," my dad declared firmly. Not until you fix this, my mom echoed. With an oddly calm heartbeat, I shut the door behind them. They launched a full-on barrage, wanting me to call my sister's husband and say everything was a lie, a mean, bitter prank. You ruined our lives, my mom shouted. You embarrassed this family, my dad accused. My sister chimed in, it's the last thing you'll do, you're going to fix this. The room was a whirlwind of fear, despair, and anger. All their voices were rising above one another, and I just let it wash over me. At that moment, I wasn't their daughter. To them, I was just an obligation, like kicking a broken vending machine hoping some candy might fall out. My dad made it clear once, saying, if you don't help, we're staying here until you do, as if daring me to push back. He crossed his arms defiantly. My mom was already talking about room arrangements like it was a done deal. My sister slipped away towards the guest room, dragging her luggage behind her. It was so absurd, and I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because they genuinely thought I was still the girl who'd let them steamroll over me. You're trespassing, I told them, like I'd said something completely alien. They just stared at me blankly. My mom chimed in with a high-pitched, you invited us. Calmly, I replied, I didn't even tell you where I lived. Behind me, my husband was already on the phone, speaking in that polite, business-like tone he saves for serious situations. My dad moved threateningly toward me, saying, you don't call the police on your family. With a weak smile, I pointed out, funny, I thought family didn't just abandon you on your wedding day. That stopped them cold. For the first time, I saw actual fear flit across my mom's face. Within 15 minutes, there was a knock at the door. 2 polite cops stood there, and all I did was show my ID and the lease with just my husband's and my names on it. The cops asked my family to leave, giving them some time to pack up. Of course, my sister yelled at me for being heartless and breaking up the family. My mom cried, and my dad muttered threats under his breath, but in the end, they left, trudging through the rain with their soggy bags, under the watchful eyes of 2 very patient officers. I collapsed onto the couch, drained, as the door closed behind them. My husband sat beside me, warm and silent, a comforting presence. The baby gave a little kick, and I realized, it's this, not them, that defines family. We moved later, found a place further away that fit the life we wanted. We kept our new address private, only a few people knew where we were. Occasionally, my best friend and his partner would drop by with funny gifts and stories about their adventures and late-night meals in exotic places. The life I wanted with my parents, simple, supportive, free, I built it somewhere else, and it was better. I heard secondhand about my parents' once prized home, how they had to sell it at a loss. My mom's business fell apart, and my sister, who always thought she was above consequences, ended up couch surfing. I didn't reach out, not when they finalized their divorce, declared bankruptcy, or when they disappeared from social media like wine soaking into a dirty floor. I thought cutting them off would feel like losing a part of myself, but it wasn't like that at all. It felt more like standing up for the first time, realizing I wasn't broken, just in the wrong place. I still have this little mint green onesie tucked away, the first baby outfit I ever bought. I was so scared to talk about it, but I finally understood, I didn't need their approval. My child will never grow up thinking love has to be earned, she'll know what real family means. The best part is, they won't even know her name. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Was it necessary to call the cops and cut them off? But then I remember who I was growing up, the girl who always put up with too much, never gave up. I realized they just never believed I'd actually leave. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think. Did I make the right call? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Thanks for watching and sticking around till the end. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on the next drama-filled episode.